In 1979, when my mom got married, she was in her mid-20s. She was living with a friend in an apartment on a quiet but a little rundown street in Jackson, Mississippi at the time. The guitarist who lived with her was out of town for the weekend. She told my mom that she wouldn't be back until Monday, so she knew she would be by herself for a few days. It was a little scary for my mom to be alone in the apartment on Sunday night, so she went to bed. She was beginning to fall asleep when all of a sudden she heard a noise in the front room, like something rattling. After a short time, she heard the front door open with a creak. At first, she thought her roommate had come back early, but as the seconds went by, she saw that the light wasn't on and that her roommate hadn't said anything. She heard things being moved around and shuffled instead. That's when she knew. Someone else was in the room, and she wasn't safe. My mom could see the person coming closer even though there was only one room between them. There was a back door behind her, close to the kitchen. It was always locked, and she didn't have the key to open it. She felt like she had no easy way to get out of the situation. Because she was religious, she began to pray, looking for help. She felt calmer and her thoughts became clearer as she prayed. Instead of freaking out, she knew the best way to stay safe was to be still and quiet, hoping the invader wouldn't notice her. The man took the money from my mom's bag and she thought he would leave her. She tried to stay calm by burying her face in the pillow while she prayed, but fear made her shake all over. She slowly opened one eye and saw a dark figure walk through the opening. He was very tall, even taller than her fiancé, who was 6 feet 4 inches. The shade of this man cast across the room made him look very big. My mom stayed still as he got closer because she thought the only way to stay safe was to be quiet. She acted like she was asleep. He stood at the foot of her bed way above her and slowly cocked his head to the side as if he wanted to get a better look at her face. Because she was scared, she let out the biggest scream she could muster, hoping someone would hear her. My mom saw that the big man had walked back out of the front room and out the front door, closing it behind him after she stopped yelling. Once she was sure this wasn't a dream, she quickly locked the door and turned on the lights. She called the cops later to tell them what happened. The person who broke in took only a few dollars from her bag. The police gave my mom small pictures of only faces and asked her to name the man because she couldn't make out his face. They all looked the same. She finally chose one of the pictures after giving it a lot of thought. The detective who was helping her was someone she knew. He worked as a teaching assistant at the school where my mom went to school, the University of Southern Mississippi. The detective seemed a little let down by the picture she picked. He told her, "I wish you had chosen that one," pointing to a different picture. Paul lives 2 streets away and lost his wife last week. My mom didn't understand how she could have recognized him since she only saw a small picture of him and not a lineup. After that, the police report about the event didn't say anything else. My mom read in the news the next week about a similar event that happened just a few blocks away. She packed her things and left the apartment behind to stay with a friend for a few weeks because she felt safer there. My mom felt uncomfortable and on edge, even though her roommate had come back. For a long time, she couldn't relax in their home because what happened kept coming back to haunt her, making it hard to sleep and feel at peace. This began in 2012 when a friend from childhood asked me to move in with her. I would like to move out of my parents' house, but she needs rent help. The house was a small but nice shack in the middle of a quiet suburban area. It was made of wood and had a porch in front. There were tall trees all around it. We think the cabin was built around the 1700s. The road next to the cabin is named for the family that first owned it. They used to own a big piece of land that is now a part of the U.S.'s biggest city. You can find pictures that look like the American colonial cabin if you search for it. We first thought the house had been a slave quarters because the area was known for farming. We learned after the fact that it had also been a stable. The idea of a stable house makes sense because my dog dug up a horseshoe that I still have. I could tell the place felt a little off the night we moved in. There were no doors to the bedroom downstairs or the room I was in upstairs. Someone added on to her house in the 1980s and made her room. The last people who lived there added a bathroom and kitchen because the first house didn't have either of them. Now that you have a good idea of the house, let me tell you why I'm telling you this. I felt like someone was watching me as soon as I moved in. It always felt like a basement in the house, dark, cold, and damp. That might make sense in this old house, but there was still something off about it. I would wake up every night in bed to the sound of someone scratching right under my bed, close to my head. Also, it wasn't just sounds. I woke up because it was so loud, and it put me off. It happened every night, and I had no idea where it was coming from. After paying close attention, I realized the scratching was slow and long, like something pulling for about a foot. At first, I thought it might be mice or something. Then I just put my hand over my head again. I shut my eyes and ears off. At the time, I was about 23 years old. I felt like I was hiding, but I wasn't going to mess with whatever was scratching the wood. Then I heard it again one night. It's likely that I would have been asleep, but I was awake and heard it clearly this time. The sound began high up, away from my bed, on the ceiling. It then moved slowly down the wall. Soon, I could feel scratching right under my bed. The noise went across the room and back to the wall after a while, and then it stopped all of a sudden. This is why I knew it wasn't mice. Solid wood logs made up the walls. They were the same on the inside as they were on the outside, with no holes or cracks for things to get through. A small animal shouldn't have been able to make such clear and loud scratching sounds in thick wood. There was no space on the floor between the roof and the floor above it. I was scared, so I went downstairs to sleep. That person, who is now my wife, asked me what was going on. I told her that. They did the same things to her when she was home by herself for the first week. This is where things get creepy. I had to take out all the screws that the last renter had put in the windows before we moved in. For the last rental, there were a lot of catalogs. We wrote "doesn't live here" on all of them. The guy was always called a shut-in Satanist in jokes, and I think we were pretty close. We both started sleeping in the sitting room downstairs because we felt safer together. It helped me deal with the strange feeling when someone was with me until one night. In my dream, I thought a dark force was getting closer, but it really felt like I was just watching myself sleep. The dark figure got bigger and bigger over my head. I could feel pressure building in my head and hear a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I woke up out of the blue and looked around the room because it was so loud. After a second, the TV turned off. It stopped right there. We had been having trouble with the TV going on and off by itself, but this time it seemed too strange to ignore. The TV was off when I went to bed, so I knew it was off. Then why was it on in the first place? We began sleeping in her room after that night. I asked her what goes on in her room, and she said nothing. It could be because it was added, I'm not sure. But it looks like our ghost set them up. We've been married for 5 years now. Anyway, I was reading one time upstairs, and just as I was nodding off, my window started opening and closing by itself. I was already sick of this spirit. I set up the same thing the next day to see what would happen. It did it once more. I finally lost it and yelled at it to leave us alone. I was sick of its stupidity. It did work for a while, though. Then when I was home by myself, alarms would go off as soon as my wife left. It would open the drawers and bang on the front door. The strange thing did slow down over time, though, and then stop totally. It was a really strange event. But now the house feels like it should. These days, I go there by myself and don't feel any bad vibes. I hope it stays that way. I don't want to deal with that creepy stuff again. After my ex-wife told me to leave, I moved into my apartment in November 2018. I was having a rough time, but I found a roommate on Craigslist. He often had to be away for long periods of time for work. It looked like a good match when we met because he was friendly and laid back. But as time went on, life here became hard for me to handle. So one day I asked him about the flat and himself. He said everything was fine until I asked if there were any strange sounds or characters living there. He thought for a moment and then said, "Sometimes it feels like you're not here." I don't think so. But sometimes it seems like someone else is here. Then, after about 2 months, I met Frank for the first time. It was still dark outside when I woke up one morning around 5 a.m. because it was winter. Like that time of year, the room was quiet and cold. It was very dark in my closet when I turned my head to look at it. The closet is a big hole in the wall, so the light shouldn't have been off in any way. In the middle of my closet, though, I saw a tall black shadow there. My neck was shaking even though I was wrapped in 2 blankets. I tried to fall back asleep by closing my eyes. I didn't wake up until after 7 a.m., not feeling bad. When my son came over to my place for the first time, something else strange happened. After a long fight, my ex-wife finally gave me custody of our kids. After 9 in the morning, I brought my son over to my house and we had a great day playing together. He loved to crawl all over the floor when he was only 7 months old. He was scared of baths, which made me worry a little. His mom sent him some cute little shoes. Instead, I chose to use a mineral bucket. I had to make him feel better. But while I was getting the bath ready, I got the same chill again. Even though my son was there, it felt weird. But I tried to forget about it and enjoy my time with him. There was only my son and me in the flat because my roommate had to go to work. It was dark. My son laid down. I saw a shadow leave my room after he fell asleep. I chose to follow it because I wanted to know what it was. One part of the living room was much darker than it should have been when I walked in. I tried to be suspicious, but when I felt that shiver, I wondered if I was just nervous from worrying about my son. After looking at the dark area for 2 minutes, I went back to making the food I wanted. The shade was there until I turned on the lights, after which it was gone. After eating, I stayed up for 2 more hours before going to sleep. The noise around 2 or 3 in the morning made me wake up quickly. It sounded like someone was trying to break into the flat. My chairs were moving around a bit. I could hear their soft footsteps on the floor as they moved around. Something quiet and slow that sounded like humming was also heard. I didn't want to move because I needed to be close to my son, who was sound asleep in the next room. The weird sounds went on for 20 minutes and I could feel my stress level rising. After that, I got up and opened my door. As I walked down the hall to the living room, a cold wind sped down my back. When I looked at my table, I stopped moving. The mineral bucket that had been full of water was now on my chair with my son's shoes on top of it. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing or think about it too much. The last important event was when my friends and I got home from the bar. I play pool most of the time and only have 1 drink at a time. Anyway, the flat was very quiet when I opened the door and went into the kitchen to make some food. As I opened the fridge door, I caught a glimpse of something standing next to the table and staring at me. I didn't look at it straight on. I chose to talk to Frank instead. I told him the rules and to stay away from my son. Let me know if he needs room or privacy, I told him, and I would do my best to honor that. He also thought the bathroom was his room, so I told him I would leave the door open and turn off all the lights every night. When I was done with my short speech, he was gone. While I was eating and watching TV, I noticed that I could barely see into the bathroom when I was getting ready for bed. It was generally brighter because of the light from the living room, but it was very dark that night. Over the years, I've met Frank a lot of times in small ways. When he came to visit, though, he never tried to hurt me or my son. I would sometimes catch a glimpse of him in the dark. Sometimes things in the house, like doors or chairs, would move by themselves. Frank never did anything bad, even though it was scary. I don't believe in ghosts or anything else supernatural, and I think science can explain everything. But I can't stop thinking about what really happened when my wife Amanda and I went camping not long ago. We chose to spend some time in the forest with our 2 dogs, Max and Luna, last Saturday so we could get away from the noise and chaos of the city and enjoy the peace and quiet of the outdoors. To get to a spot about an hour away, we packed up our tent, food, and other things we would need. We live in Washington State and love going on hikes and camping in our free time. But when we camp, we stay away from sites with lots of other people. We're always on the lookout for quiet, out-of-the-way places in the woods where we can be alone with nature. We found a great spot this weekend, 10 miles down an old forest road. It was in a national park, and there were tall trees all around it. We saw some other campers spread out along the road on our way to the campsite. After some time, we found a place where we could be alone and be quiet. There was no phone signal and no way to talk to the outside world. Around 10 p.m., we went to sleep. It went from being warm in the 70s to being cold in the 40s, so we stayed in our tent to stay warm. I naturally don't sleep well, so I often wake up in the middle of the night. That night was no different. Every little sound, like the wind moving leaves or the snapping of twigs, woke me up. On the other side, Max and Luna, my dogs, kept getting in the way of my wife and me. They were moving around to find a good spot, which pushed me to the tent's edge and made it hard to sleep. I stayed in my sleeping bag until morning and listened to the birds singing and the soft rustling of leaves. It was around 5 a.m. The cool morning air made the tent feel cold. As I lay there, taking in the peace, I heard something that made my heart beat faster. A woman's voice asked, "Is Amanda here?" from about 50 feet away. I felt scared and my face got hot when I realized I had no idea who it was. I lay there for what seemed like 10 minutes, hoping to hear the voice or someone walking through the bush. The birds singing early in the morning was all I could hear. Finally, I got up, opened the tent, and took a look around. There was nothing strange about what I saw, and I certainly did not see a woman. I started to calm down and thought that while I was sleeping in the tent, I must have still been falling asleep and waking up. What if it was just a dream? A woman calling out to my wife made me think about it all the time because it seemed so real. Soon after, my wife woke up and I told her what had happened. She also told me I must have been dreaming. We chose to leave early that morning so that we could do some work at home before the work week began. It was nice to be outside. I did want to get things done around the house, though. We took down the tent and put our things in the car. It's been 3 days, and I still can't think of any other reason besides dreams. But I remember it so clearly, and I can't get rid of the feeling that something strange happened that morning. I looked on the internet to see if anyone else had the same thing happen to them. I've looked for old legends or stories about voices calling your name in the forest, but I haven't found much. I've only told my boyfriend and his brother about this. When I told his brother, he laughed and acted like I was crazy, so I didn't tell anyone else about it. I can't stop thinking about what I saw, though. It's always been on my mind. There is a lot of countryside around where I live in England. That day I was driving on a small country road near a main road. There was a large open field with bushes on either side of the roads. It was quiet, with only a few cars going by on the main road. I was talking to my boyfriend when I saw a very tall, human-like figure standing by the side of the road. It was very thin, like skin and bones, and didn't look like it had any clothes on. That thing had pale skin and looked really bad, like it was sick or weak. It moved so quickly that I couldn't make out its face, but from what I could see, some parts of its face looked fuzzy, like they had been smudged or blurred out, like you had changed the picture. It quickly crossed the road in front of me and went into the field. I went more slowly and looked back to see where it went. There was still enough light to see the field, even though it was getting dark outside because the sun was going down. I looked around the area one last time to try to find it, but it was gone. There was nothing it could have used to hide because the field was empty and the grass was too short. That fast, no one could have crossed the whole field to get to the other side's trees. Whatever it was seemed to disappear into thin air. I was too scared to stop the car and look, even though my boyfriend told me to. Though my heart was racing, I felt like I should keep driving, so I did. I didn't even stop to look around. I'm not sure if driving that day was a bad idea. I don't know why it scared me so much. I can't stop thinking about it since then, and it's making me crazy. It's been a while, and the only thing that comes to mind is that it might have been something supernatural. If it was a person, how could they have disappeared so quickly? They did this a few years ago when I lived in a college town. My friends still had 2 semesters to go, but I only had 1. I chose to share a room in a house with 2 guys I met on Craigslist to save money. That may seem strange, but that's not what's strange. So one day, I ran around the neighborhood. When I got home, I chose to take a shower right away. A loud bang came from the front door while I was shampooing my hair. The people who lived with me were friends with each other, so I thought one of them might have friends over. At first, I didn't worry about it. My shower wouldn't stop banging, though. It got stronger and stronger. Then I heard a big crash outside the bathroom. I got a towel to see what was going on, but the bathroom door opened before I could move. The man in the doorway was someone I had never seen before. He looked right at me. It was quiet as another guy looked around the corner from the hallway. I had to get down, the first man told me. I said no, but I didn't know how to get out of there safely. It dawned on me that my cell phone was in my bedroom. My only plan was to get my phone and leave the bathroom. Before I could leave, I took a big breath and tried to remember, but it was gone. My friends told me things that I remember now. They were home, thank goodness. When they heard me yelling, they ran out of their rooms. The man let go of me when he saw my roommates. He looked angry and helpless. He told them to give him his money. They told me, "We don't have your money and we don't even know you." They were still scared and confused. "It's possible that you went to the wrong house." After a short, nervous moment, the 2 men slammed the front door shut and turned to leave. This is where my memory picks up again. I fell to the ground and started crying furiously. What had just happened was so unbelievable to me. I was curled up like a bug on the floor with my face down. I called my mom from my room once I got back in charge of my body. By the time the cops showed up, I could barely tell her what had happened. The sounds I heard earlier were 2 men kicking the old door from the 1920s in half to get inside. It wasn't long before the cops showed up. I told them what I could remember, which wasn't much. There had been 50 home invasions that day, and it wasn't even noon yet. The cops told me they would do their best to help, but it was already noon. Even after 10 years, it's still hard for me to talk about what happened. My sister went to UCLA for her first year of college and decided to live in an apartment right next to the LA National Cemetery. My dad and I helped her move in by carrying boxes and setting up her things. But when we got home, my dad told me he saw something in the apartment that made him uncomfortable, and he didn't want her to stay there. To give you some background, my dad is a doctor, but he is also very religious and has seen and heard many strange things that don't make sense. Over the years, he has had dreams that came true exactly as he said they would, which has scared people around him at times. He also says he sees things that most people would call supernatural, like ghosts or demons, and that these experiences are very real to him. I'm glad I didn't receive the ability to see or sense those things, though. When we walked into my sister's apartment, my dad said he saw a dark shadow move quickly through the living room and out of the back window, which made the blinds spread out. He thought it might have been a pet, but when he got there, the window was locked and closed all the way. This made him feel uncomfortable. It just so happened that the window looked out over the cemetery. Over the next 2 years, my sister and her roommates had a lot of strange things happen to them. One time, my sister would hear her name called from the living room even though no one else was there. Even when all the windows were shut, she would sometimes feel a cold breeze blow by. Strange sounds like footsteps in the hallway or things moving around by themselves were also heard by her roommates. A lot of the time, someone would tap or shake their legs and say their names when they woke up at night. When everyone was asleep, pots and pans would move around in the kitchen and make noises that woke them up. One night I'll never forget was when I was visiting. The person who lives with my sister asked us to watch her arm and invited us all to her loft. She just stood there in the room. It looked like something was there because the hairs on her arm stood up. It was very creepy, but the hairs on her arms and legs would fall back down as soon as she moved. She did this over and over, and every time she crossed the line, we could see her arm hairs stand up straight as if there were something there. They would go back down when she moved out, but it wasn't just my sister's place that was haunted. Her neighbor had strange things happen to her too. The girl next door said she could see the ghost. When she went to my sister's place, she would sometimes quickly move out of the way as if she were letting someone go. She seemed to be able to sense something we couldn't see. My sister stopped asking her over because this scared her a lot. The same neighbor also told a story about how her athletic boyfriend came over one day and was quickly pushed backward to the ground, as if someone had tackled him. My sister was at the apartment by herself one time and kept hearing her name called from the loft above. This made her feel very uncomfortable. She was so scared she couldn't even get out of bed, so she called me and asked me to sleep over. About a 2-hour drive away, I was at college in San Diego at the time. I was at a party after midnight. I drove even though everything was going wrong because I knew her house was really cursed. I was lucky that nothing strange happened to me while I was there over the weekend. When my sister was alone in that apartment, she still couldn't get rid of the feeling that someone or something was watching her. My husband and I went to a Fleetwood Mac game last spring. At the last minute, my husband thought it would be a good idea to look for tickets on Craigslist. After seeing an ad, he replied, but we weren't sure if we'd get the seats. We waited because we thought it might not work out. The person we had talked to then sent us the tickets via email right before the show without even asking for money. Though it came as a surprise, we were both very happy because we loved their music, especially Stevie Nicks. When we got to the place, it was easy and quick to go through security. We were shocked at how close we were to the stage as we walked up. We were sitting in the middle of a big indoor venue on the floor. It's the same spot where bands and NHL games take place. We both said it didn't seem real to be there. My husband talked about the pictures and movies that were being shown behind the band on the big screen while we were watching them play. On the screen, there was a silhouette of a lady dancing. My husband said it looked like me. At first I laughed, but then I heard it was true. The way she danced was a lot like the way I dance, and her shape looked a lot like my hair and an old dress I have. The woman danced while ravens flew across the screen, and she raised her hands like a bird. Before I knew it, I was going in the same direction as the silhouette on the screen. I thought that maybe we were seeing it that way because of our own biases. When we got home from the show, my husband told me he thought he saw energy being passed into me while the singer sang. Now I should say that I'm a singer, and that was just the beginning of my writing again and making songs. It all seemed like a good sign. but I didn't think too much of it. In the evening, I watched some talks with Stevie Nicks. I found one in which she talked about Triad, a book that gave her the idea for the song Rhiannon. Unfortunately, I forgot to check out the book that I had promised to do. After a few months, I chose to make the small, mostly empty room in our 2-bedroom apartment into a closet. I bought racks from IKEA to help keep it all in order. It was a mess in the room while I was working on the closet job that week. There were piles of clothes and shoes all over the place. I found a stack of books I'd never seen before while I was cleaning up. I'm sure I didn't buy these books. All of them looked very old and dirty, and they weren't in the room before I started to clean. There were even spider webs on some of them. My heart stopped when I started to look through them. 3 was one of the books. The books were gone before I could ask my husband if he had brought them. He said he had never seen them before. He had to be telling the truth because I hadn't said I wanted that book or any of the others. I didn't know where the books came from after thinking about it for weeks. I gasped in shock when I saw the cover of Triad. It got there, but I have no idea how. The whole thing has been very special, to say the least. I'm a woman of 25 years. In November, I moved to a new part of town by myself with my dog. People from the hipster crowd love this area, which has cool shops, art galleries, and one-of-a-kind bars. Even though there is a bit more crime here than in some other areas, I still like the vibe. There are lots of great bars and restaurants close, and there are also great dog parks where my dog can play and meet new dogs. Upstairs, in a 6-unit house, I'm the only single person living on the first floor. Sometimes it gets quiet. The front door of the building is locked, but the gate at the back doesn't, so anyone can get into the flats through that door. My dog got really sick soon after I moved in. As soon as she ate, she had seizures, which scared me a lot. I took her to the vet. It was tough to figure out what was wrong. She was throwing up every 2 hours at night, and I had to clean up after her. I couldn't sleep at all. We were both having a hard time, and I was stressed out and worn out. It happened on and off for 2 months until I finally took her to a better veterinary emergency room, where she had to stay the night. I had been running with her in my arms at that time. It made me cry, feel powerless, and be so stressed out. As soon as we got to the doctor, they took her in to see what was wrong. Around 7 p.m., I got home by myself, tired and afraid about my dog, because I didn't know what would happen next. The vet called me every 30 minutes to an hour to let me know what was going on with my dog. I had just hung up the phone with the vet again at 1:15 a.m. when I heard something at the back door. There was a sound like someone was shaking my door handle, walking away and then trying again. At first, I thought it was just the wind. I called 911 right away at 1:29 a.m. There was no one there when the cops got there. They came with about 10 police officers and flashlights to look in every room and closet. This made me feel a little safer, but they didn't find anything strange. After what happened, I was really scared, so 2 days later I put in a Ring doorbell to keep an eye on things. Because I hadn't slept in 36 hours, I even stayed at a close hotel for 2 nights. Because of all that, I haven't paid my rent this month because my landlord still hasn't fixed the lock on the back gate or put a guard to my back door. But I got a warning that if I don't pay soon, I'll have to pay late fees. I was also told that I might be able to move to a different building and start a new lease there. This might be a good chance for me to live somewhere safer. The people who want to rent out my room still haven't told me what to do next. With everything I've been through lately, it's a lot to think about.